The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. A warm welcome to this Sustainable Energy for All webinar. We will be talking today about full system accounting of energy efficiency in buildings. This Sustainable Energy for All webinar is brought to you by ICLEI, C40 and UNEP, and supported by the World Resources Institute. My name is Maryke van Staden, and I'm your host today, and we hope to have some excellent presentations and nice interactive discussions, so line up your questions. Today, on the 3rd of November, we are little more than a month away from the 21st Conference of the Parties, talking about climate, hoping to get a good climate agreement. And certainly, energy efficiency is at the heart of that discussion. Without much ado, I would briefly like to introduce Katja to you, who would introduce the technical issues, just to show you how the functions of this webinar tool work. Katja, over to you.
Welcome everyone, my name is Katja Müller from the ICLEI Capacity Center. I'm just going to give you a quick technical introduction. First of all, this webinar is being recorded and it will be made available afterwards on our YouTube channel. You see the control panel in front of you, and if you have any questions, you can send them to us by typing them into the chat box, which you find at the bottom of the control panel. There's a little plus, just click on it and it will expand and you can type in your questions. You can address it simply directly to all organizers and panelists. Also, if you have any technical problems, please use the chat function. We will be using also two polls in order to know a little bit about your background and your needs. One will be at the beginning and one toward the end of the webinar. And finally, I wish you an enjoyable webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Katja. Maybe let's delay with the poll now. I see a lot of people are still joining. So maybe in the meantime, we can introduce the lineup. We've got an exciting speaker lineup, certainly with Shannon, Lily, and myself as your co-hosts. And we have Eva Hoos from DG Energy, who will explain the future of building policy and the exciting activities are managed and coordinated by the European Commission. We have then two speakers from cities. From Vancouver, Sean Pander, the Green Building Manager of the City of Vancouver in Canada, and Astrid Madsen, Sustainability Program Advisor of the City of Rotterdam in the Netherlands. I will quickly introduce to you the accelerators and where these fit into the process, and then we will run our poll immediately afterwards. Maybe a very brief introduction on ICLEI. I see some of you are also not necessarily dealing specifically with local governments, with cities, as far as I'm aware. So ICLEI is a city network, a global city network. We work and support local governments to support their sustainable development, dealing with all topics, waste, water, buildings, transport, and so on. And our focus is very much on empowering and supporting the political decision makers, how to take informed decisions, but also the municipal technical staff who might not necessarily be aware of new recent developments, and we try and keep them informed and also offer support and guidance where they require that. This could be on processes or accessing finance, but also technical and policy guidance and advice. Moving quickly to our Sustainable Energy for All platform. The Ban Ki-moon launched this initiative, and it is an incredibly important initiative to bring together different stakeholders from all over, be this at the governmental level, be this from private sector. Our aim is to mobilize and stimulate and encourage synergies and cooperation, looking at these three aims of Sustainable Energy for All: ensuring universal access to modern energy services, doubling the global rate of improvement in energy efficiency, which is more challenging than it sounds, and doubling the share of renewable energy in the global energy mix, which is easier than it sounds. So this brings us to a different number of accelerators that were launched. These are called energy efficiency accelerators. Today we will be talking about buildings and the district energy accelerators, and the others are, however, also very highly relevant, looking at lighting, appliances and equipment, vehicle fuel efficiency and industry. The accelerators were launched very much, and these were launched in September last year at the UN Climate Summit in September, with the aim to bring together these partnerships. The partnership around the Building Efficiency Accelerator is focused, our lead partner there is the World Resources Institute, and ICLEI and a number of other partners are involved. I will briefly look at who they are. This probably is already slightly dated. It's a growing partnership, and if you're interested, please flag your interest via email afterwards. We'd be delighted to join you, for you to join the initiative. But you can see we have NGOs, associations, networks, companies, as well as city governments that are joining us. Now, efficiency in buildings, we know that this is a sector that has or releases huge emissions, and when we look at the energy demand in the building sector, the growth in the building sector, we definitely need to understand that we need to reduce that large impact. Considering buildings consume 40% of energy demand and account for nearly a third of greenhouse gas emissions globally, it's a sector we know how to deal with, we know what to do, and it's just literally scaling up and engaging more actors, more supporters who can also reduce efficiency and help switch to clean fuels being used in the buildings. The large potential, considering we can reduce or energy demand by a third by 2050 if we follow and scale up these best practices. And the long-lasting implications. Buildings are not built to last only for a few years. In most countries, they could even last centuries, especially as we see in Europe with the beautiful historical centers. Certainly, we need to not lock in high costs through making poor choices at this stage. The technologies are available, they're cost effective. We know what the barriers are, and they are being addressed step by step. Awareness, lack of understanding what is possible. Technical expertise is not readily available everywhere, and we certainly need to build a more skilled professional group dealing with all kinds of elements, engineering, architecture, design. Also the urban planners need to be brought in, and many others. There is uncertainty around performance. We need to focus how to finance this, how to scale up, considering that many people do not own their buildings, their apartments where they live. Financing in a rental situation is quite challenging. We will run a quick poll at the end, also looking at these barriers from your perspective. Where do you think this fits in, and what is challenging or the most challenging in your view? So we're looking at diffusing decisions, making sure that in action single technology approaches are removed, and that we really focus on integrated approaches that are optimal and obviously tailor-made to the particular situation. The accelerator in this particular case aims at establishing new partnerships that would enable creating more ambitious projects, but also looking at policy and addressing those barriers, bridging the efficiency gap and avoiding lock-in. The Buildings Efficiency Accelerator, BIA for short, has a requirement for cities to sign up, for local governments to sign up, and they need to commit to doubling the rate of building efficiency by 2030 in the targeted sector within their jurisdiction. So they need to look at the baseline, define at least one intervention on the policy side, one demonstration project to be announced at the COP21 in Paris in December, and they need to commit to track and communicate and share their experiences with others. Simple engagement process with a lot behind it. The light touch is open to any city. We will give guidance and advice. The deep dive will be made with very few selected cities that are in the process of being selected now, and we will really support them with intensive, deep approaches in terms of renovating or looking at how they can deal with their building sector in a very particular concerted effort with the partners supporting. Let's move back now, and I hand over to Lily Riahi. Lily is the advisor on sustainable energy in cities at UNEP, and she will focus very briefly on the District Energy Accelerator to give you an overview on that point. Let me quickly switch to her presentation. There we go. And Lily, over to you.
So I agree with you. The Sustainable Energy for All initiative is quite ambitious in its objectives, but I think it's entirely achievable with the technology of today. Here, as Maryke mentioned, we have Ban Ki-moon officially launching the District Energy in Cities Initiative and the Building Efficiency Initiative, or Accelerator, at the New York Climate Summit as 2 of the 5 initiatives that together will aim to achieve, double the rate of energy efficiency improvement worldwide by 2030. Having evaluated numerous technology options, the UN identified district energy as one of 5 key sectors that will help achieve this doubling, together with buildings, transport, lighting, appliances, and equipment. And I think that's really a recognition of the role that district energy has come to play in our energy and climate agenda and its huge potential going forward. Next, please. So why district energy is a question. On this slide, we show that modern district energy is a system that combines district heating and cooling infrastructure with other elements such as combined heat and power, thermal storage, heat pumps, and/or decentralized energy. Cities can connect sources of heating and cooling that cannot be connected without district energy infrastructure to provide space heating, cooling, and hot water services to buildings, such as waste heat from industry or power stations, heat from groundwater and sewage, free cooling from lakes, rivers, or seas. It also allows for large sources of renewables that are not easily connected on an individual building scale to provide heating and cooling services, and it allows for the integration and balancing of high shares of variable renewable power and renewable heating and cooling, particularly through relatively inexpensive thermal storage. And by providing this kind of infrastructure for the connection of wasted and surplus heat and large sources of renewables, in addition to providing efficiency, it can thereby reduce energy consumption for heating and cooling of urban buildings by 30 to 50%. So this is one of the core reasons that the United Nations Environment Program is working on the District Energy in Cities initiative and working on promoting district energy as a key enabler of the sustainable cities of the future, well, today and the future. Next slide, please. There's many remaining barriers, long-standing barriers. Although we see the shares of district energy expanding around the world and several national and local governments setting targets and policies, there's still a lot of long-standing barriers to the greater deployment of modern district energy, and some of those also stem from new innovations in the technology applications, as well as the comprehensive approach that multi-sector, multi-technology approach that district energy provides. So some of these barriers that are also similar to barriers you see in the energy transition also for renewables include awareness, so a lot of the opportunities and benefits for improving efficiency in the building sector through district energy is not known. Diverse technology applications are not known, and the multiple benefits and savings are not known. Some of this is linked to a big gap in data and information. A lot of the time, political decision makers may not know the energy demand for heating because it can be mixed with hot water, power, and cooking, or they don't know the energy demand for cooling, for example, from air conditioning or electric chillers, which is hidden in a building's total electricity bill. So this leads often to policymakers underestimating the potential role of heating and cooling in general as a sector, and also district heating and cooling, and how that can contribute to objectives like access, affordability, and reliability. and they therefore tend to overlook the need to regulate, research, or support this sector. Of course, you also have barriers in terms of capacity, local institutional capacity, which stems from the integrated approach offered by district energy, which is the opportunity it presents, but also the challenge because it requires significant coordination and local capacity for planning and implementing these projects across multiple city systems and levels of governance. And of course, holistic planning policies and harmonized incentives and regulations, which is a large part of our discussion today. I could mention many areas where this is an issue for district energy, but particularly today we see often that there's not consistent agreed accounting methods to develop for to account for in the efficiency ratings, labels, and standards for buildings, and the recognition of the benefits of district energy in some green building certification programs. This is changing in many cities, but it's still quite a challenge and can result in inconsistencies in policies promoting district energy and promoting efficiency in buildings. Next slide. So what have we done? Well, we've, to contribute to the doubling the global rate of efficiency, improvement of energy efficiency through district energy, we need support from experts in the field. And so we've utilized the global and neutral platform of the United Nations to build a partnership through which the experts here and many other city partners and other experts and institutions who've been working in this field for decades can combine efforts to address the global barriers I've just mentioned to district energy development and efficiency in the building sector. Next, please. Broadly speaking, the objectives of the initiative are to work with through this global partnership to increase awareness on the multiple benefits, strengthen policy at the local and national level, and create an environment that attracts investment in district energy systems, particularly also by the private sector. Next slide, please. So the initiative, again, very quickly, will touch across 4 core areas, 3 noted in this slide. We will be doing assessments, so this is really looking at various kinds of assessments to be able to identify the potential and benefits of switching to district energy, looking at local resources such as waste heat and free cooling and cost-benefit analyses. These will be really critical to justify local and national policy developments, which is the next core area of activity, both in terms of disseminating best practice and actually providing tailored policy advisory services, and implementation, by which I mean we will be doing actual demonstration projects in cities, in selected cities, where the initiative will support the development of a project from planning all the way to the tender, leading to investment in the city, and this will be accompanied by a long-term policy investment roadmap and capacity building and ongoing partner support. The purpose of these demonstration projects is largely to demonstrate and refine the various tools and methodologies and approaches and policies that can then be scaled up nationally and regionally and globally, because there is no one-size-fits-all in the realm of district energy. And we're also working, on next slide please, on global awareness raising, which is very important in terms of raising confidence in district energy systems and dispelling myths. Part of this will include, of course, regional and global forums, involvement at high-level climate and energy conferences, such as COP21, such as the Climate Summit, and other events, but not only standalone activities, also partnering with the various other cities and organizations that we're working with to discuss the message. For example, we were also participating in the EU Conference on Heating and Cooling, and many others. We're also creating a virtual platform, and this will be where we provide the tools and methodologies that I just mentioned in the last slide, and as well as fundraising and matchmaking webinars to actually provide a link between cities that are looking for support and all our various partners that can provide that support. One example of this, next slide, is our partnership. Recently, we partnered with this Climate Technology and Transfer Network, the CTCN, which is the operational arm of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, the UNFCCC. in order to, in the Bosnian city of Banja Luka to modernize its district heating system and save 80,000 tons of CO2 a year, as well as energy and water. And just to give you some background, the Climate Technology Center Network facilitates transfer of technologies through 3 core services, such as providing technical assistance at the request of developing countries and cities to accelerate the transfer of these technologies, creates access to information and knowledge, and fosters collaboration among various climate technology stakeholders. And I've provided the website link, but this is really to provide an example of how we are actually partnering and with other actors in the field to provide that support where it is suitable. Next slide, please. Also part of our awareness raising activities, as many of you may know, and participated in supporting the development of a technical guide to district energy. It's our flagship publication, District Energy in Cities, Unlocking the Potential of Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy. This was launched in February by Achim Steiner, our Executive Director at UNEP. We worked with 45 cities around the world, including Rotterdam and Vancouver on the webinar today, and partners of the initiative to detail concrete policy, finance, technology, best practice guidance. Next slide, please. I just want to emphasize the basis of our work in the initiative is really through the recommendations we've developed from our champion cities and 150 interviews, and you can find out more by going to our website. Next slide, please, and I'm coming to an end. So from this publication, one of the key drivers of district energy in cities was the need to decarbonize buildings, the building sector, and also to promote ambitious building standards, or such as net zero buildings, and meet various targets. Obviously, the need to reduce building sector emissions is great. We have to have a 77% reduction compared to today's level by 2050 in order to meet the 2-degree, in order to limit climate temperature rise to 2 degrees Celsius. And more than 60% of building energy consumption currently is for space heating, cooling, and hot water, and that's largely met by fossil fuels at this time. So clearly, if we want to meet our ambitious climate and energy ambitions, we're going to have to tap solutions that address both demand and supply in buildings. And this is something that we saw many of our cities are starting to look at, more holistic building policies. Next slide. So these are some of the examples, which I'm sure you'll hear more about today on the webinar, and I'm happy to discuss in greater detail offline. But we certainly saw, for example, city-specific building codes. For example, Milan, we just released a case study. They require new construction and retrofits to meet a minimum energy efficiency standard for new and retrofitted building. But what's important about this is that they don't look only at the building, but they look at the supply of heat and hot water. And so by meeting, these standards can be met by connecting to their district heating network in combination with building efficiency measures. And so this is really one of the best practices we see in building codes that really look at that, primary energy efficiency, and therefore incentivize fuel switch in district energy systems as well as demand measures. So there's also targets and land use planning and many other policy programs that we see in London, Amsterdam, Tokyo. For example, in Paris, they have building certificates that account for district cooling, and so you can be rewarded and have higher certification if you're connected to district cooling. So these are some examples of best practices, but we'll also hear about some of the challenges when these building codes and certificates are not harmonized with other district energy policies in the city. Thank you so much. I hope I didn't speak too fast. I'm still working on my speed of speech, but I'm happy to discuss any of the topics I've mentioned today at another time at your convenience. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from the rest of our speakers today.
Great, thank you very much, Lily. And yeah, a mite fast, but very clear. Thank you very much. I'll hand over to Katja now. We've got more than 75 participants online, so we'd like to do a poll to see from which organization where do you work? Which organization do you represent or own? Would be very interesting to see if you're working for a government, local government. Let me quickly pause my screen share. Katja, can you just confirm people can see the poll?
Yes, I think everybody is participating. And I see that the majority of people are actually from the business or private sector. That is 33%. Then second are research and academia with 24%. And third place are international organization currently. Yeah.
Okay,
and then,
excellent.
We have 11% local governments, 13%.
Okay, fantastic. Great, thank you very much for your first interactive session in this webinar. Now, without much ado, I'm delighted to hand over to Shannon Lawrence, Director of Global Initiatives at C40. Shannon, would you like to share with us your presentation?
Great. Thank you so much, Maryke, and I will try to be extra brief. So I did just want to start with a very brief introduction to C40 for those who may not know. We are a network of more than 80 cities, primarily megacities, working together to tackle climate change. And primarily we engage across 6 different initiative areas, including energy, waste, transport, finance, sustainable communities, and adaptation. But today I'd like to focus a little bit on our work in the energy space as it relates to the topics we'll be discussing on the webinar. And for our cities, issues around district energy and building energy efficiency are very important for all of the reasons that Maryke and Lily have already mentioned, considering the significant percentage of emissions that come from the building and energy sector, and also that the opportunity that these sectors present in terms of building energy efficiency solutions and district energy solutions for our cities who are trying to reduce their emissions. So C40 engages cities in this space primarily through 3 working groups or networks. More than half of our cities actually participate in one of these networks, many in all 3 of them or in 2 of the 3. But sorry, just to come back, thank you to that slide. Our district energy network, which will be the focus of today, and we have a number of cities on from that group, as well as also our private building efficiency network, that looks at building energy efficiency in private, mainly commercial, but also in residential buildings. And then finally, our municipal building efficiency network, which considers efficiency in buildings that cities own, lease, and... Next slide, please. So looking at our district energy network, we're very pleased to have our lead city on today with Pander from the city of Vancouver presenting later on. There are about 10 cities that are active in this group right now, and I've identified some of the main issues that cities are working on together through this network, including ownership models and policy frameworks. C40 did recently join the District Energy in Cities Initiative, and we're very pleased to be working with UNEP and ICLEI and the other partners on this project. And one of the ways that we'll be collaborating is to raise some of the issues and challenges that our cities have identified in our District Energy Network through the District Energy in Cities platform. And this will certainly help to ensure a deeper and broader knowledge exchange for both cities and some of the other partners in the initiative to bring in more expertise and resources in our search for solutions to some of these pretty complex problems. So with that, I'd like to hand it back to Maryke and hopefully move into some of our other presentations, but just to say that we're very pleased to be part of the webinar and to thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Shannon. We now move to our lineup of the technical speakers who will be giving an overview of what they're doing and where things are moving. And hopefully these will also lead to some interesting questions. Eva Hoes is the Policy Officer of DG Ener at the European Commission. And the European Commission has certainly started some interesting activities quite recently. So we're very keen to hear what Eva has to say. Eva, I guess we'll share your screen, if I understood correctly. So, Katja, can you support us in moving screens?
Unfortunately, Eva is not yet connected to us. Perhaps we could move on to the next presenter in the meantime. And by then, hopefully, we have solved this technical problem.
All right, good, we'll do that. Then I hand over to Sean, our lone male on the panel, Sean Pander, Green Building Manager of the City of Vancouver, also known as Green Vancouver and Renewable City. We're quite keen to hear what you have to say and share with us. Sean, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. Very pleased to be presenting this morning and sharing some of the experience as we evolve our path along the journey to a 100% renewable city, renewable energy city, which really depends on an integration of renewable district scale energy systems and effective green building approaches. Next slide, please. Sorry, next, yeah, thank you. This is the Greenest City framework, and really the objective that we've been working under for the past 5 years was to endeavor to make Vancouver the greenest city in the world by the year 2020. 3 general focus areas were sort of to eliminate fossil fuel emissions, go down to zero waste, and support healthy ecosystems. While promoting and supporting the development of a green economy. Really at the core of this, it's a very holistic plan. It provides many points of engagement for the citizens in ways that matter to them, but at the core, the key metric really is greenhouse gas reductions. And so given that over 55% of the emissions in Vancouver come from buildings, it's a very core part of our strategy. Next slide, please. We've been working to reduce emissions quite effectively. I think as a piece of context, Vancouver has been blessed since the mid-19th or mid-20th century with a very high ratio of renewable electricity through hydroelectric power. So over 90%, over 95% of our power comes from renewable sources. So when looking at this slide, you can take into account that, you know, since 1990, our population's grown over 30%. The number of jobs in the city has increased almost 30%. And we have successfully been reducing greenhouse gas emissions since the year 2000 without doing transformation of our electric system. We know that's super important in many jurisdictions, but we've moved on to the sort of transportation, space heating and natural gas, and fugitive emissions such as methane from the landfill. Next slide, please. So just in a bit of context, if you compare greenhouse gas emissions on a per capita basis, most people believe, you know, that North American cities, you know, are kind of in a separate league due to high energy consumption, poor building practices, etc. But I think, as you can see from this, that it is possible in a North American context to get to fairly low emissions per person. Next slide, please. So within the Greenest City plan, there are 2 primary targets and 1 overarching goal. The high-level goal is to lead the world in green building design and construction and eliminate the dependence on fossil fuels. And the specific targets are to have all buildings constructed from 2020 onward to be carbon neutral in their operations. So it does not account for the embodied emissions of the materials or the construction of the buildings themselves. But equally important is to reduce the energy use and emissions from the existing stock to 20% below 2007 levels. And again, what we realized in adopting this plan was that you couldn't do, it wasn't either or, you couldn't do green building efficiency and hit either of these targets. And likewise, you couldn't just do renewable energy at a district scale. Both tactics or both approaches were key to meeting, or will be key to meeting both of these targets. So we depend on green building practices and renewable district energy to both reduce use in our existing buildings as well as to achieve our carbon neutral building operations by 2020. Next slide, please. Really key to the realization of the importance of both was building the Olympic Village for the 2010 Winter Games, and it really led to a paradigm shift. And in building that, we had the objective of trying to get as close to carbon neutral neighborhood as possible. And given that electricity was relatively clean, but relatively expensive locally, you've got to take into account the energy prices in Vancouver for both electricity and natural gas are amongst the lowest in the world. So it does create an interesting challenge in terms of making the economics work. But what we learned here was that by taking a district energy approach, we could effectively do large-scale renewable energy in this. And we call it the neighborhood energy utility, which is serving the Olympic Village and has grown since then by 260% over the past 5 years. But 75% of the energy demand comes from renewable sources, and there's an overall reduction in greenhouse gases for connected buildings by 60%. Now that system in particular is primarily, the renewable source is taking waste heat out of the sewer line. This is just across small inlet, I guess, from the downtown core, and there's a sewer line coming from the downtown core, and we have heat pumps that extract the excess heat from those sewers and use it to heat the entire neighborhood as it expands. The thing here is that the rates for consumers and customers are competitive to conventional energy sources. Next slide, please. So I think it's important to understand some of the fundamentals of why district energy works and why the city came to understand it was a key part of it. Is first of all, neighborhood scale technologies are much more cost effective per unit of energy delivered. So they're much more cost effective at large scale. And I think equally interesting, I think a lot of people don't realize, is it does overcome that split incentive barrier where you've got the higher upfront capital costs. Those can be borne by a utility who can amortize those incremental costs over 20, 25, 30 years, and then recover those costs and repay those capital costs with the operating cost savings. So again, that's a real challenge in private buildings, is how to overcome the high upfront capital cost and connect it to the energy savings. And that's fundamentally at the core of what makes district energy successful, is you can do it. The other piece that led us into this path was that it is adaptable. Currently, the system I'm speaking of uses, sewer waste heat pumps, but new technologies can be added into different systems, and those systems can be integrated into a grid. Or instead of having, over time, if a better technology becomes available, more cost-effective, easier supply for energy, it's instead of trying to retrofit, 100 buildings in the downtown core, you can retrofit a whole district energy system to the new technology and effectively reduce the emissions from a large number of buildings. Next slide, please. So this is just a local graph to illustrate that, the cost effectiveness in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by approaching it from a district scale versus a building scale. And this is technologies, it's not envelope practice. So this is just looking at renewable energy technologies at a building scale on the left, on the cost per annual ton of carbon emissions avoided. So again, you could divide those those dollar values by, say, 30, because you'd be seeing those savings over 30 years. But it does illustrate the grouping. Oh, we're missing a label. But the high cost ones to the left are the building scale technologies based on experience we have locally. Then the cluster of sort of 3 dots at the elbow of the curve are new renewable district energy systems being established in high density neighborhoods, and that shows them. And then the low outrider on the bottom left and the far right is the cost effectiveness of the conversion of large existing district energy systems to a renewable energy source. And that looks at 2 large hospitals in the city, but you could also count universities have an opportunity here. And the far right one is the conversion of the large legacy steam system that serves Vancouver's downtown core. Next slide, please. And next slide. So really at a high level, Vancouver's strategy is to establish new district energy, sorry, back one slide now, is to establish new systems at very large high density development sites where they come up in the city. A second very important part of it is to convert those legacy steam systems for renewable energy and use both the new systems and the converted systems to serve adjacent developments and expand. So not only do you have new developments being built at, say, 60% carbon reductions from a more conventional approach, but you are, when you convert those legacy systems, seeing large step reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So both are very important tools. I think for folks who have not worked in detail in the district energy world, what makes the economics work are load density and the timing on which load comes on board. Because if load is going to come on board over 30 years, you've got those high upfront capital costs, and in essence, you'll never recover them. This is important as you understand some of the need to synergize green building policy with district energy, but I want you to keep that load density and the timing of loads in mind. But some of the key tools that we're using right now is we built the district system for the Olympic Village and operate it, and gave us lots of great understanding of the technical, economic, legal, and risk issues around these. We're actually pursuing partnerships with the private sector to build additional new systems and convert the existing systems. And we're doing that through franchise agreements. And in essence, what we do is in a franchise agreement, we get a legally binding agreement whereby we guarantee that new loads will connect to the system in exchange for a guarantee that the system at a certain threshold of load will convert to a defined sort of target-based greenhouse gas intensity of energy delivered, i.e. We get guaranteed renewable energy. Next slide, please. Now, that was a bit of an overview of sort of our approach to district energy and how important it is to both our reducing emissions from existing buildings, but also for new buildings. I want to just touch a little bit on the green buildings, because as we get into that, we start to see where we're running into conflict between these and introduce some of the moves we're making to resolve those conflicts. But currently in the city, one of our primary tools to foster innovation and capacity building for green buildings and lower carbon emission buildings is through rezonings. And in essence, when we give developers the right to add density to a site, we extract not only public benefits such as daycares and public realm improvements, but we require for all rezonings, which is very significant in the city, about over 60% of large development by area goes through a rezoning process. And we require LEED Gold certification with a minimum of 6 energy efficiency points. And that's been super in terms of transforming the building market locally, especially the commercial building market. LEED provides a third-party verification for the indoor air quality and the water conservation and all the measures that might be pursued to achieve that LEED rating. But as a policy tool for low carbon buildings, it's led to some challenges. Next slide, please. And in summary, the three challenges is first, is that LEED is based on ASHRAE 90.1, which is sort of a fairly widespread North American standard for energy efficiency in buildings. And LEED and ASHRAE for better than code is in essence a cost efficiency, energy cost efficiency standard, not an energy use efficiency standard. And what this graph illustrates is for a given building, no changes to the building, the green bars in the number of points the building would have been awarded under the LEED system depending on when certification was pursued and the cost differential between electricity and gas. So at the far left you can see this building, if it had pursued certification in 2006 when electricity and gas rates were very comparable, that it would have gotten 17 energy efficiency points in LEED, and then you move to the far right after the shale gas explosion, I guess, in North America and the crashing of natural gas prices. That very same building would get no energy efficiency points in 2013. So that's one of the big challenges. It's not a standard which drives to the outcomes we want, either energy use efficiency or greenhouse gas reductions. So the second challenge we have with it is LEED is very focused on building scale solutions and has very limited number of credits available for renewable energy because it was conceived as doing renewable energy on site, and so it has sort of an upper limit threshold for renewable energy points, which when you're looking at district energy, you know, you can be meeting 50% of the energy use with renewable sources quite easily, and of course it's the LEED system tops out long before that. So whereas you can score, I think, upwards of 19 points for energy efficiency, you can only score, I believe, 7 for renewable energy at a maximum. So that's a big challenge. So buildings that connect to a low carbon district energy system don't get very many points within the LEED system. And then finally, and I foreshadowed this, is to get these systems established and up and running, initially they may need to be running on more conventional energy sources until the load reaches a certain threshold. So for a development area, you might start with a conventional natural gas system, or even be forcing very green buildings to connect to one of these legacy steam systems, which aren't necessarily super green right now, but have an obligation in 3, 5, 6 years to go very green. But understandably, LEED doesn't give any credits to buildings that are connecting to these future renewable district energy systems, regardless of how secure that future outcome is. So that it really does create a lot of challenges in terms of it's a cost efficiency tool, not a use efficiency tool. Doesn't really provide very many points for large scale or large percentage of renewable energy, especially coming from off-site. And then finally, given the economics of making district energy work and the load timing challenges, it does not give credit, even where you're in a franchise area that has a legal obligation to go to low carbon in a foreseeable future. You don't get any points there. Next slide, please. So looking at sort of some of our approaches here and how we will move towards better aligning our green building policies and our renewable district energy policies so that they're more in harmony. One is we're looking at establishing within our rezoning policy and then over time reflecting that in our building code, greenhouse gas intensity and thermal energy demand limits. So what we've come to realize is you need to measure and specify limits on the outcomes that you specifically want to achieve. We've historically referred to this % better than ASHRAE or that, this many LEED points, very indirect way, and you don't get necessarily the outcomes you want except by accident, but you're kind of at the whim of many things such as energy price differentials. So by establishing greenhouse gas intensities for rezonings and new buildings, as well as establishing thermal energy demand limits, that will begin to move us in a much more predictable and reliable fashion to low carbon buildings. But what it also does, by establishing greenhouse gas intensity limits, you can thereby recognize the carbon reductions from connecting to these low carbon or renewable district energy systems. So really, it provides a tool that isn't looking at energy cost efficiency, but really what we want to control for, greenhouse gas intensity, and you therefore would be able to meet those limits by connecting to a low carbon system and get recognized and rewarded under our green building policy for doing that. We are making a shift, though. One of the things we've come to realize is the importance within the green buildings in building is not to emphasize as much equipment efficiencies and renewable technologies at the building scale, but really shifting hard now to much better building envelope performance. Historically, Vancouver, and you can see pictures of Vancouver here, has a large amount of glass, really immature design community understanding of thermal bridging currently, and so that was one of the reasons for driving this thermal energy demand limit. These passive design approaches really can minimize demand, very much simplify building systems, which we're coming to understand simple operations, especially in the residential sector, which the majority of our large-scale development is residential and not commercial. Simplifying those systems is super important to making sure you achieve your outcomes and maintain them. But also the focus on envelope is because once you've built a building, it's kind of forever. The systems, the lighting, even the heating, those equipment will evolve and get replaced over time, so you always have a chance to come back and do it better in 5, 10, 15 years. But the envelope, once you've done a good envelope or a bad envelope, you are in many ways locked into it. I mean, not 100%, but it's very hard to change it from a good envelope to a bad or vice versa. And finally, Council today is considering the renewable city strategy, committing us to have only renewable energy for all sources, transportation, buildings, industry, etc., by the year 2050. And within that, that really is, if Council adopts that today, it will require us to have zero emission new buildings by 2030 or sooner. So again, as we move towards really driving hard at a building scale, the paradigm will shift once again, because as demand goes down to a minimum, eventually the economics of large-scale renewable energy systems won't work anymore. And that's not to say the systems, the neighborhoods that were built connected to these systems, it won't be working for them. It'll be working great. But the emphasis for district energy from there on will be to serve those neighborhoods well, but then to, in essence, provide low carbon energy to existing buildings within the city. Next slide, please. So just wrapping up, we love to show this slide. It's images taken from the 1980s as well as the 2000s, from the same vantage point in the city, and it really makes it clear that we overestimate what we can achieve in any given year, but underestimate what can be done in a decade. So that ends my presentation, and I hope we will have time for questions after the presentations are complete. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Sean. That was a very dense and rich presentation, and some very, very valid points made. So we hope to get some good discussions afterwards. Just a
Maryke?
quick, yes.
Maryke, hi, it's Lily. Sorry to interrupt you. I have Eva, who's from the European Commission on the line through my speaker, so hopefully this will be working okay. So if we could move on to introduce Eva, that would be great.
Okay, fantastic. Thanks, Lily. Great. Eva, over to you. Eva Hoes, the Policy Officer of DG Ener of the European Commission.
Good evening, everybody. I'm very sorry for these technical difficulties. If you wish, I can give you a brief summary how we approach buildings for the group, if you would be interested.
Yes, hi Eva. I think that's of great interest to look at the synergies between buildings and district energy in your heat and cool strategy.
We identified some key facts regarding buildings that basically already somehow dictate what we need to do. And if you look at the European building stock we can see that around 75% is inefficient, and the buildings, the most part of the buildings were constructed in a time where there were no or very few energy performance requirements for buildings. So we have a very inefficient building stock, which on the top of that is largely supplied from fossil fuels. So only 16% of the building's heating and cooling is supplied from renewable energies. We see a very low renovation rate, and we see a very low new building rate. So the conclusion is that this inefficient building stock will stay with us for the long time, and it is difficult to see how we can achieve decarbonization by 2030 or 2050, so the long-term objective, if we don't do something about the building stock. In the building space, we see three main areas of action where we can act and reduce the demand for energy and heating and cooling in buildings, and where we can move to more renewables. The first element is behavior and information for consumers. We see that consumers do not really have good information how much they consume, how much is their spending is related to heating and cooling, and what is that they could do about the fact that they basically spend between 3 and 16% of their income on heating and cooling. The second element is that the building envelope can be improved to be made much more efficient. We see that the buildings that have been built in the recent years are really consuming the fraction of what buildings before, let's say, the 80s consumed. And we can certainly improve the heating and cooling system, where we have the task to bring much more renewables into the buildings, and also to use much more waste and waste heat to supply buildings. And this is where there is a large role for modern district heating systems, because these systems can bring to buildings renewable energy sources that are much harder for individual heating systems or cost more to supply. And definitely waste heat is something, for example, for industrial plants is something that individual heating solution cannot really provide. Then we also see that there is a big potential to move to more decentralized systems, so allow buildings to have supplied from district solutions or from on building systems. And there is a large potential to use smart systems that would first improve the information to consumers. Second, it would help to decarbonize the buildings as a whole, not only the heating and cooling system, but also the electricity system. And in the heating and cooling strategy, we try to look at these issues together and see, for example, how heating and cooling system can be operated in a smart way, so they give more information to consumer have much more control on how they regulate their system, and then to have on the system level a feedback mechanism between electricity and heat and cool. So, for example, if building could be also supplied from renewable electricity, and the heating cooling system can serve as a storage or additional demand for renewable electricity. And in all these aspects, what we see is to tackle the building renovation domain, to tackle how to roll out the existing renewable technologies and efficient technologies on heating and cooling system for consumers, how to roll out district heating and cooling. And in all these, local authorities, national authorities, but especially local authorities, municipalities have a very large role to play, to provide more information for consumers, to coordinate saving through building envelope with the deployment of sustainable supply, to provide strategies how to decarbonize buildings heating and cooling system at district level and building level, and how this could be done in a most cost-effective way with the best trade-offs locally or nationally. So in this, local authorities have a very large role to play. They have multiple roles depending on also the local and national systems. But for example, if there is potential to do heat mapping, to do heat planning, to identify renewable energy sources, to identify how they can upgrade their building stock, how these areas can be coordinated. In all these, local authorities have a large role to play, and we need to look at how at EU level we can empower these local authorities, but also consumers, to make this energy transition happen, and to happen this energy transition in a way that is good for them and provide lower energy cost and all kinds of other benefits individually and social and collectively for the society as a whole.
Great, many thanks.
So this would be a nutshell from, I think, that I can add to the role of cities and the heating and cooling and the building approach. And of course, we have a number of policy instruments at hand. For example, the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We are reviewing this directive. Some of the elements to speed up the renovation rate in the household sector, in the services sector, can be put there. How to make energy performance certificate work towards more renovation, towards more district heating and cooling, towards more smart system. That is one of the elements that we could look at. The role of cities and district heating and cooling, how this can play a role and what can be done to help deploy them at a much larger scale, and also in cities and countries where they really don't have the experience with district heating and cooling. So these are the issues that we are looking in the strategy and try to develop.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Eva. I'm not sure if you can hear me, so would you be able to stay on for some questions? Yes, I can hear you. Oh, wonderful. Can you stay a little bit on, or do you need to leave for your next meeting? I wasn't quite clear on that.
Let me see. I just asked for a. Yes, I can stay until 18:15. So the meeting has been rescheduled.
All right. Okay. Maybe we could maybe take a question or two at this stage. In any case, so are there any questions for Eva specifically at this point in time from our participants? Maybe feel free to type in your questions, and we'll monitor and make sure that these are also asked. So, Katja, I'm not sure if there are any questions at this stage specifically for Eva. I've not seen any. And then maybe in the meantime, let's set up and move over to Astrid. And Astrid will be sharing her screen with us. So Astrid Madsen is the Sustainability Program Advisor of the City of Rotterdam. And she will be working or telling us about the exciting program Rotterdam deals with in terms of also looking at and advocating for national policy, making sure the change happens there that also could support the city level action and moving forward on systems energy efficiency. So Astrid, over to you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I will talk a little bit about Rotterdam. I will tell you about our 4 principal starting points where we think you should start or think about when you proceed in energy efficiency. And I will tell you shortly about district heating in and around Rotterdam and what we do and where we're going in the next steps. So very quickly, just about Rotterdam, we are the 2nd biggest city of the Netherlands, but with 600,000 inhabitants, I realized that worldwide seen it's not that big. We have a big port, Europe's biggest, and even worldwide seen it's a big one. And it's a port that is of great importance to the Netherlands, and many port activities are related to energy, and so also with CO2 emissions. So it is increasingly necessary to combine more economic activity with fewer raw materials, less waste, less noise, lower polluting emissions, and so on. So for several years now, we realized that sustainability in the broader sense is a challenge, but it's also a joint challenge. So we really look for working together with local stakeholders as well as regional and national government and stakeholders. So if you look at the energy, the way we approach, especially the building stock, but anything really, we say, well, you first have to reduce. So what has been talked about in improving the envelope, obviously, yes, you have to do it. You have to avoid your energy demands as much as possible. And then you have to start reusing the energy flows available. And what we think in Rotterdam is that if you cannot reuse it at the buildings level, you should make it possible to exchange it with the neighborhood, a district, or within the city, by having a communal energy net. And only after reusing every kind of waste flows or recoverable energy flows you have, then you start producing sustainable energy. And even if that's not enough, but hopefully it will be, then you start having clean or efficient fossil fuels with CCS or whatsoever. If you look at the Dutch policy on national level, it does not see the same. So the red box basically is where Dutch policy, national policy, focus on. So they do not have really clear rules on reusing energy waste flows outside the building level, and that is an opportunity that really is a shame, because in our harbor area we throw away about 150 petajoule of heat, which is the same amount of 12% of our annual gas use. So that's a huge amount. You cannot reuse everything, but you can definitely use a bit. And it doesn't make sense, to our opinion, to build a biomass a CHP while next to it you throw away the heat anyway. So that's why we really would like to reuse first and then proceed further. The second principal starting point is that this is a picture that long has been the view on sustainability: electricity, solar, wind. Recently, heat was added to the programs. The realization that a huge amount of energy demand was in heat demand. We think you have to look at the energy, but above all, we think also that you have to look at all combinational influences the system has. So not just value the CO2 emission reduction, but also look at the dependency on fossil fuels, look at the NOx emissions, look at the improvement of the economy or the competition of organizations. So we think you have to look at a whole systemic approach. Then we think you should look at the best combination of solutions, and I think it's already been said a little bit. Having investments in the building, which is a solid blue line, is especially with buildings with a low energy label, very efficient. The costs are low to improve your building, and the benefits, the green line, are high. So it makes sense to do so. Then At a certain point, and whether it's at a D level or a B level or C level, the point is that there comes a point where investing in the building, investing in the envelope, the costs will rise exponentially while the benefits do not. And there comes a point that there's a point where investing in the area, like district heating, makes more sense. So we really focus on and. So not just one, but combination of optimal solutions. And our fourth point is that you have a system, an energy system available to facilitate your energy transition. So there where the optimal combination is both building and district heating, you need to have a district heating network. And we see this picture basically shows a fourth generation network we have to work towards, where you can connect, interconnect also the power grid, have power to heat kind of solutions, have solar power, have residual heat. So we think you need to have a system that backs up or facilitates your transition. So if we go back to the beginning, and I borrowed these pictures from Paul Voss from Euroheat and Power, because just funny. But besides that, these two pictures tell me a lot, and they tell me two things that I think in this case are important. First, it's hard to predict future, because I don't think we have a helicopter in our garage, nor have a nuclear-powered vacuum cleaner. And secondly, apparently in the 1950s, we did not think fossil fuels would be a problem, or fuels would be a problem, energy would be a problem anyway, not in kind of emission or in the amount that was available. I mean, if you think you can have all your own helicopters, surely emissions were not a problem. And this view on energy systems, on that view, our current energy system is built. So we have to deal with a system which is, especially in Holland, with 95% of our buildings being connected to a gas network, it's a system that is not updated to the energy transition that we need. So if you look at district heating in the city of Rotterdam, this is the city center just after the Second World War. We had, not for good reason, but we did have the unique opportunity to rebuild the city center. And with that, the choice was made to build district heating in the city center, and also build a lot of new houses. So the beginning, if you look at this picture, it says the amount of district heating we have. You can see the red lines in the city center, and at the top right side, there are some areas also connected to district heating. Those were built during the oil crisis, so the period where the gas alternative was not that good. And we are at that time connected to two big CHPs and several smaller ones for the peak load. In the same period, during during 2005 and now, we saw a lot of opportunities, both within Rotterdam as in the region. And we had a lot of ambitions based on CO2 emission reduction. But those ambitions and opportunities were seen mainly by local governments and local stakeholders, not so much the national government. That really came later, that they put heat on the agenda. We had a shared ambition. We signed an ambition together with stakeholders in Rotterdam to connect all houses. We even made legislation for all new buildings that they were mandatory to connect to district heating. We invested in a heat company to connect our waste incinerator to the city of Rotterdam. So we really were involved in together with the stakeholders to make good propositions. And we really try to make steps in meeting our ambitions. If you look at the current situation, which actually this is not completely the current situation, but it's close to the current situations, you can see a few things. First of all, the yellow and the red line are huge transport lines that connect the waste incinerator to our current district heating network. So we replaced our gas CHP, and with that had an immense reduction of CO2 emissions. What you can also see, if our ambition is to connect half our city to district heating in 2030, it's not going fast enough. So we really need to, well, make extra steps. And well, you can't see it, but we still have ambitions, we and all the local partners. And the good thing is that also the national government puts heating on the agenda. So basically what you see now is there's a second wave of opportunities and momentum to try to expand our district heating network. So we have the national goals and the EU goals. We have already our vision and ambition, and what we did, we sort of jumped into realization and really found out that that really didn't work. So we are now working on a sort of intermediate step, translating it into concrete plans and designs, and really be concrete about where do you want what kind of solutions, and also work on a roadmap and realization strategy, and really get insight in your limiting conditions and criteria, so we can understand what you need and what we need to make steps. If you look at our local approach, we did have our ambitions already, but the realization really did not go as fast as we wanted. And the thing is, new buildings are not a challenge, and we had rules for new buildings, but not for the existing buildings. And we think about 90% of our existing buildings will be there, are already built now. So it's like already been said. You need to, if your building is there, it's harder to improve. So really, you have to look at ways to improve the existing building stock. So we are now working on two ways. If you look at district heating, but we try to combine it with other solutions like solar panel on houses or electric kind of solutions, and really improving the envelope. We have two types of projects: the pilot projects in an area, in a district, and it's more of a bottom-up approach. We look at the best combination and really try to really get insight in social drivers of the end users and what are their barriers. So really to understand how we are going to give side or how to organize an energy transition, because in the end you have to bring along the end users, of course. Besides the top-down or the bottom-up approach, we also have a top-down approach, because we think you also need to get insight in what kind of legislative, governmental, and financial barriers do you need to overcome. So we're working on, and we just started it, so it's really at the beginning, but we are planning to create an energy infrastructure plan. Basically, it's a map, a very concrete map that shows where you need what kind of infrastructure. So based on the best combination, basically on the four principles, you look what kind of combination of solutions are the best, and then what energy infrastructure do you need to facilitate that energy transition. And the next step is have a roadmap. So knowing where we're going, what do we need to do now? Who needs to do what, and what are the conditions that needs to be met? And we want to get insight in different approaches. So, for example, you can say we make it mandatory that every replacement of a gas boiler is being done by connecting to district heating. But then you end up with having a triple infrastructure, triple energy infrastructure, electricity, gas, and district heating for a number of years. Or do you say no? Well, we want to transform in a shorter period, but then you need different kind of rules and regulations, and maybe also subsidies or whatsoever. So we want to get a feel of what kind of roadmap is realistic and workable. Regionally, we are also working on a district heating system, but on a bigger scale. It's the heat roundabout, connecting the harbor and the greenhouses and Den Haag and the bigger cities. We already had some design. We calculated what kind of trajectories were useful, and we made some planning. And now we work together with stakeholders, public and private, national and local governments, to make it a bankable project. And we hope that next year somewhere we can make the next step in realizing our big heat roundabout as a backbone infrastructure in connecting heat demand and heat supply. And we also are part of the international EU project, Celsius, and that we have 5 partner cities and universities and energy companies that are part of the project. And we are building a Celsius toolbox. It's a technical toolbox. It's a demonstrator project, so it's really about sharing knowledge and experiences. We are aiming for getting 50 Celsius cities to partner up. Basically, that the easiest, it's very easy to do. You just have to email me, so please email me, and then you can have one letter saying, well, I would like to be a Celsius city, and then you're just one of the ones, and you're getting information. And the idea is that having a network of different cities, it then enables you to well, share knowledge and proceed and make bigger steps than when you work alone. So getting to the end of my presentation, if you look at how we are working, at this moment we have legislative, financial and organizational challenges. The business case is very thin due to upfront costs. Rules and regulations in Holland are not in place. There's not a level playing field. And what we think that needs to be done is that the national policy needs to support local city level action, because we think that everything comes together in the cities. It's in the cities where air quality and energy poverty and the opportunity of building improvements come together. And it's also the place where you have the projects to be realized. So national policy needs to be formed in such a way, first of all, based on 4 principles. So it has to be about reduce, reuse, and produce. It has to be a holistic or a systemic approach on the energy system. It should support the energy infrastructure, electricity and heating, if at those places where it's efficient, and it should be about the best combination of solutions. And if national policy based on that makes legislation and financial support system, then at a city level action can be taken to to transform your city into a low carbon energy efficient city. So this is the way we look at things, and we work very much together with many local and public and private partners, and we were looking forward to the next year, because we think a lot of things are changing at this moment. So this was the end. I think questions at the end.
Okay, thank you very much, Astrid. That was also a fascinating presentation, and great to see also how you address some of those challenges. Very interesting to see that the national governments are not always initially on board, but that also just shows the collaborative effort between different levels of government is such a key thing to make this really work as well. Unfortunately, some of our speakers had to drop out due to other commitments and council meetings and so on. So I have a question for Shannon. Shannon, the question on how many which cities in India do you work with in the C40 Energy Initiative?
Great, thanks so much, Maryke. And I'm sorry, I did try to respond to the chat. I'm not sure it went through, but currently C40 has 4 Indian member cities across our network, and that's Jaipur, Bangalore, Mumbai, and Delhi NCT. None of those cities are currently engaged in our building energy efficiency or district energy networks in our energy initiative. And that primarily has to do with the powers of the municipal government and who controls some of these areas, but we certainly are trying to work to engage them in that. And if the person who asked the question wants to send me or Zoe an email, we'd love to hear if there's additional interest that we could help capitalize on.
Okay, great. Maybe just also answering some of the questions. We actually have the first pilot for district cooling system in India would be Rajkot, and we are really delighted to have that leadership in the country. ICLEI also supports a number of other Indian cities like Thane, Gwalior, Shimla, Coimbatore, Panaji and Pimpri-Chinchwad, just to mention a few. So there is an interest, things are moving, but we certainly need to mobilize many more local governments to explore and understand and work with us. And this is exactly what the two accelerators, the Building Efficiency Accelerator and the District Energy in Cities, focus on, is to build that capacity, to raise awareness, and to get answers to some of those tricky questions. I think the examples, both from Rotterdam and from Vancouver, you've seen how they've tackled in their particular contexts in a very robust way. They've designed and approached systems to really focus on how could, in their particular context, they find good solutions. I find it very interesting. Astrid and Sean also both focused on the need for a systems approach, making sure that you invest where it makes sense as well. And looking at the combination, what is the best combination of solutions, embracing those optimal solutions, and where it does not make sense, then you need to look for other approaches. That combination of policy, technology, partnerships involving different stakeholders, in particular also your end users who need to sign on and be interested in using energy. I really like the approach also mentioned by Eva, to give the users control, to inform them and make sure that they understand what this is all about. Understanding the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is rather tricky and certainly very abstract for the normal building user. Let's quickly look at some of the questions coming in. By Lorcan Loans, what is the role of meters or smart meters in district heating and cooling according to this panel? Now, this panel, let's hand over. Who would like to answer this particular question? Lily, maybe go ahead.
I can reply.
Sure, go ahead, please.
After speaking from the city of Rotterdam, I think meters are very important because I think it was also said by Eva, it's very much also about behavior. And having meters gives you insight in the behavior, because we found in the Netherlands that the theoretical reducement of energy use of a building that has been improved was much higher than the real improvement. So what I'm trying to say is that if you insulate a house, you expect the amount of energy used to drop dramatically. But what we saw is that people were using actually more or the same amount of energy because they thought, oh, my house is insulated now I can heat up my bathroom and my kitchen, while they did not do it. So having understanding of what kind of energy you use really helps. And we also see it with people having their own solar panels. They see how much energy they use, and you see that their behavior really changes, because it's sort of a sport to not use more than the amount of energy you generate by your own. So having meters is important, and the more information and the cooler the information is, the better it works, I think.
Thank you very much, Astrid. Cal, you've asked a question about development of standards and cost effectiveness calculators. I think that's a question we will probably answer in our district energy and buildings accelerator platforms, just to make up for the time, because we're close to wrapping up, and that's quite a technical question to dig into. So maybe as a wrap up, if you consider Lily's image at the beginning in her presentation of all those multiple air conditioners on the outside of a building, in hot climate systems, that is the challenge. We need to tackle those through switching to energy efficiency, energy efficient technologies, renewable energy sources to power, and certainly a lot of the standards that we have in place at the moment could be upgraded and improved to further make sure that we focus exactly on the problems and looking not only at the reduction of final energy, but really supporting how to switch to clean fuels, more efficient systems. I would like to draw your attention to the slide you see in front of you, the call to action. We understand at the end of this year a huge decision that impacts on the future of this world and on all of us will be taken in Paris at the Conference of the Parties, the 21st one. So there's also been quite a track record there. We need to get that scaling up, and this is the aim of many national governments and certainly many local governments we work with, to get the commitments. So if your ministry, government, regardless of level, industry, your business, your university, NGO, can help support, link to these initiatives, you're warmly invited to join. We need your support, and also pool those commitments. If you're a local government, share your commitments in the Carbon Climate Registry. We're busy collecting these, and we will make an amazing number and an amazing presentation to the national governments at the COP21. We need that data. We need to understand what you're committing to in order to make a strong case to show things are already moving, but clearly we need many more commitments to move forward further and speed up the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions, but also access to clean and affordable energy and optimizing the energy efficiency approach. We will have a fantastic program at the COP21, accessible also to the people who cannot access the negotiation area. This will be in the Cities and Regions Pavilion. You're very warmly welcome to register for that and join us. We will have both a district energy system session there, as well as other sessions that address finance, access to climate finance, buildings, transport, all the topics that local governments and cities deal with. There's another question, last question, let's quickly check. Many cities are shifting to meters in Eastern European context on district heating systems, such as apartment blocks. Rolling out meters has to be done carefully. That is very clear. This seems to be more a statement, but that's very valuable nonetheless. Rolling out meters have to be done very carefully. Shifting to consumption-based tariffs in some markets could lead to lower consumption of heat and potential fuel poverty. Fuel poverty is also a key word we should not forget. We do have people who cannot afford their fuel, and hence also Sustainable Energy for All addresses exactly this particular topic. We can unfortunately not wrap up in an extensive way, but I wish to leave you with a few keywords. Engaging your citizens, looking at holistic plans such as Vancouver and Rotterdam have explored or are busy exploring. Looking at carbon neutral operations in your buildings. Looking at the package of useful solutions from policies to technologies that you can bring in to see where does it make sense to do this at the building scale, where does it make sense to switch to the district scale, and where a combination is both. Sean said cost efficiency is not use efficiency, so explore these issues when you are considering your shift, your support, and the transition to the renewable energy future. We need recognition and rewards, and these standards such as the LEED certification system do that, but we also need to tweak them to be more friendly to support that transition to a sustainable energy future. Looking at more decentralized systems, moving away from these big scale utilities is certainly part of the future. Looking also at waste heat, this is a resource that we should be looking at. And last but not least, you have a role to play in this, so we warmly welcome you. Please join us, pool forces, and let's make this a sustainable future. I thank you all very much for joining us, and we will send you around the link to the recording in order to also please share widely and make sure we can help a lot of other people also be more informed on the possibilities on this interesting topic of sustainable energy for all. Thank you very much. We warmly thank you for joining us and wish you a good morning, afternoon or evening wherever you are. Goodbye.